This episode is brought to you by Dick Dyer Mercedes-Benz, the first Mercedes-Benz in South Carolina.
It's just come together nicely. It amazes me. I'll tell you a funny story. I love going to concerts. In fact, Vince, I don't know if I told you about, I just got back from Baltimore Saturday. We went to the Queen concert with Adam Lambert. And if you want to see a great show, go see Queen with Adam Lambert. I went to see Journey in February. And Vince, you may be too young to remember who Journey is, but
I like it.
I'm at Journey. I'm buying some damn T-shirts. And David, you got to understand, in the health insurance and Medicare space, this time of the year, unfortunately, you can't turn on the TV without seeing one of our commercials. So I'm buying some T-shirts, and this girl goes, "Aren't you Joel Lourie?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me. How you doing?" She goes, "I'm such and such." And then she goes, "And I just want to tell you, I just love your podcast. Wow. You and Vincent are so funny, and I learned more about government and your podcast than I ever did in college."
And David, that's why we do the podcast. And the other part of this is you want your guests to feel good. Yep. So David, on our show, we tell them at the beginning, this is not like Meet the Press where we're hoping to make big news from you screwing up guest, or, it's not like the old Crossfire show where people are pitting the guests against each other. Really, we're trying to let the public know how things work. So, we tell a guest, if you say something and you wish you hadn't have said it, you just call us the next day and we'll erase it. Like, that's not the point of the show. We want this show to convey the truth about what goes on, not some flub or mistake, or some personal little tidbit that you wish you hadn't have said. So our guests, I think, feel very at ease. And honestly, it makes them say more things on the record than they otherwise would.
Yeah, good example of that, David. We had a pretty prominent person. We were talking about medical marijuana, and it was with somebody who has a very prominent role.
We won't get too detailed on who it is, but they were a prominent person.
Yeah, and I don't know, we were talking on what we used to do in college, and he mentioned that he used to smoke a little weed in college, and then he calls back the next day and says, I probably don't want my kids to hear that. Can you take that out?
Sure.
Well, I tell you, your show comes across exactly how you guys want it. I mean, it's always conversational. It's never, I don't think I've heard one confrontational type of dialogue going on. And I think, that's what keeps people invested, is that, it's positive. It's, you're letting people share their story, share their thoughts in a very non-threatening way. And I think that's important for people to see actually happening in the political arena these days. So,
and that's one of our goals. I mean, we brought on, I'll give you a good example. And we've had everybody from Mark Sanford, Jim Clyburn. One of the coolest shows we did, we were able to arrange through some friends to have the former Meet the Press moderator, Chuck Todd, weigh in. But we brought on the superintendent of education, Ellen Weaver. And, I think her views on education and Sheheen's views and my views are probably not that similar. But when we left the show, I was like, she was just a pleasure to talk to. I don't change my politics about it, but I really appreciate the genuineness in that conversation.
Well, you can always appreciate the person. You don't have to necessarily agree with their ideology.
Right. Yeah.
So the last statistic I heard about the show and its popularity around you guys is you are in, the top 10% of all downloaded podcasts, at least on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
Which just, so what's your reaction to just how this has blown up and how not only regionally popular you are, but also internationally popular?
Well, here's the truth of it all is a podcast is going to either appeal to a mass audience.
Yep.
And in other words, it's kind of a generalist thing, or it's going to be really a specific topic. And we chose the very specific. But what that means that I don't think we realized is that people who are interested in South Carolina politics may be in other places. So, yes, most of our listeners in South Carolina, that makes a lot of sense. But we also have a lot of expatriates, right? People who are from South Carolina who want to keep up with what's going on. So they're in D.C., so they listen to it in D.C. Or maybe they've just moved somewhere. Maybe they went to USC or Clemson or were from here. So they listen to it in California. Or they listen to other. And the other interesting thing that you just mentioned is there are those same people in other parts of the world. And so I don't know, Joe, we have like 6 listeners in Germany and, you know, a few listeners here and there. I don't think we ever thought about that, but in a way we're a connection to the state for people. And then there are just people who are interested in politics in general who, you know, maybe they're interested in South Carolina as the first in the nation Democratic presidential primary and Republican primary, that kind of thing. But it is interesting to follow. We are really proud of our statistics. We know we're in the top 10% of podcasts in the country. We like to say we're the number 1 political podcast in the state. There are not really any metrics on that, so we just say it.
David, two funny stories. One story, one comment. I was going somewhere recently and was in the Charlotte airport, and I was in the American Express lounge and just was talking because it was my wife, Becky, and I, and another couple. And I see these 2 young guys. I say young, they're probably in their 40s, and they're kind of looking at me. And we all get on the elevator together, and, you know, I'm in T-shirts and sweatpants, and they're in suits. I'm like, yeah, I used to dress like that when I travel. Now I just don't give a shit anymore. And they goes, are you Joel Lourie? And I said, yeah, I am. He goes, we live, I forgot where they live, and I think it was like Cincinnati. They were flying into Columbia to interview for positions at a hospital. They're both docs, but they're from Charleston. So he said, we recognize your voice from the podcast.
Oh, wow.
Now, how crazy is that? I'm going to answer your question about popularity, because this is, you know, we talk about this on the show. For being such a small state, South Carolina has some pretty significant players in politics, right?
Yeah.
You know, you can go all the way back from Strom Thurmond and Fritz Hollings to.
You can go all the way back to Andrew Jackson and John C. Calhoun.
Yeah. I was going to mention those guys. I just forgot their names. But what's interesting is in South Carolina, if you go to a reception, David, if you and some friends go to a party, most likely you're going to be talking about one or 2 things, and they're both contact sports. Football and politics.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If you go right now, whatever words are coming in your mouth, 75% of that conversation is going to be, how'd your team do this weekend? Or can you believe Biden's doing this, or Trump's doing this, or McMaster's doing this? And so I think we tapped into that a little bit, Vincent. You know, and now we just got to figure out a way how to make money out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that very last part. We just picked up our first paid advertiser last week. So,
congratulations!
That's awesome. Just took a year and a half and a lot of arm twisting.
Yeah.
But you mentioned you guys have had some really interesting guests on there. Who have been some of your favorites and why?
Wow, we've had so many good ones. So I will say that maybe one of the most just kind of happy and interesting interviews was with Jim Clyburn, because Jim Clyburn has seen South Carolina politics up front and close for probably longer than anyone that's really active. And so he could reminisce back into the 60s and 70s and 80s, the civil rights movement, you know, the ascendancy of the Democratic Party, the Republican Party taking over, and his relationship. So that's a really good one to listen to if any of your folks want to listen to it. And then I loved interviewing Mick Mulvaney. Mick sat with me in the Senate. He became Trump's chief of staff, was in Congress. And Mick just has a good sense of humor. So he would do this great he did this great Trump imitation, which was hilarious. So and I think that gives you a flavor for like the different politics we have on the show. And then, of course, we have what I would call our friends. And those are, you know, the Speaker of the House, Merle Smith, Thomas McElveen, Marlon Kempson from Charleston. These are folks who serve in the General Assembly that we worked with. And those are always fun too, but there's a lot of good ones. Joel, I don't know, what are some of the more fun ones you did? He loved the Chuck Todd episode. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think and listen, we've been on the cool thing about Clyburn's interview is his staff kept saying he's got 45 minutes, and we're talking to the congressman for an hour and a half, and they're pulling him out of the chair, you know.
Yeah.
But it was really like a walk down memory lane. I mean, a lot of people see Jim Clyburn as, you know, one of the most powerful men in state government, but I mean, to understand his journey, you know, to understand how he got to where he is today, every South Carolinian should listen to him, whether you're blue or red or white or green. I mean, it's just such an important interview. So I agree with that. I'll tell you, one of the ones that really scored very well early on was Senator Dick Harpootlian.
Yeah.
And you know, this was
from Columbia.
This was all before his representing the Murdoch case. But Vincent and I both have known Dick. Did you serve with Dick, Vincent?
Yeah, he was elected. His last term was we served together in my last term.
Okay, so I mean, I've known Dick since I was right out of college, and he's very active in the Democratic Party, and he's just got story. He talks about smoking grass with Lee Atwater. He talks about being on the campaign
and he's fine
trail.
with that staying in the podcast, by the way.
Yeah, being on the campaign trail with Bill and Hillary Clinton when some maybe not so positive news about Bill was breaking. I mean, just campaigning for Barack Obama, and it was really interesting to hear him. And then I thought the Mark Sanford interview, Vincent, was pretty cool because Sanford's view of the Republican Party is not today's Republican Party, or at least it's not Trump's party. And then I can't help but love the one we did with Gilda Cobb Hunter. Gilda Cobb Hunter is this fixture around the State House, and she's just so brilliant. And she comes in and she can just go for hours. But I hope it comes across in our shows. We have fun. If we weren't having fun, we wouldn't do it because we sure as hell aren't making any money at it. So we just have fun.
We do from time to time drink a little bourbon with our guests.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, all that just comes across in your show, and just thank you for what you guys are giving the state of South Carolina as a gift to educate them. So where next? How long do y'all want to keep doing this? Or, how do you intend to grow it in a different way? What are your thoughts about the future?
Well, we haven't
really talked about that. Go ahead, Vincent. I'm anxious to hear what he says.
Well, I'll say we are doing a few different things we've added to the show. So we'll do up to 4 live locations a year. We'll go to an event if they want us to. That's one of the ways we try to generate some revenue. People can hire us to come to a convention, or that's been fun doing on location shows. And that's something new. We might, continue to do that or grow it. I originally thought maybe we'll do this for a couple, 3 years. In a way, it's gotten easier as we know what we're doing. And so I think one of the things we would really like to do is to have the podcast when there's a hot contested presidential primary race in the Democratic and Republican parties. We're seeing that. Well, really, we're not seeing that in this race. Like, let's face it, Donald Trump is going to win the Republican nomination and Joe Biden is going to win the Democratic. I think it would be fun when there's, no kind of designated nominee to have this show, because I think we would get a lot of the candidates on the show, and that would be a lot of fun. So, I don't know how long we'll do it, but if we keep doing it, maybe in 4 years, we'll see that. I think we'll keep doing it for at least another year. Joel, what are your thoughts?
I don't know, Vincent. You haven't given him my new contract.
We've got great sponsors. We really are blessed with our sponsors, and that helps us pay the staff. That makes it easier. Joel?
I agree with that. It's the staff that makes a difference. I mean, they really do the heavy lifting. I mean, all our show is no different than the 3 of us going out and having a beer and talking politics. Now we just sip a little bourbon, we talk politics, and everybody else listens to it. I mean, but we are enjoying it. If it ever becomes a burden, I mean, I think one of the things, David, that we did is we decided to go to every other week, even during this session, because we were doing it the first year or two every Thursday. And man, by the time you'd wrap one up, it was time to start working on the other one, and it was a little too much for both of us.
I think, David, one of the times when we'll know it's time to quit is right now. Our friends and peers are still in positions of power and authority in the legislature, in the executive branch, and in the press, et cetera. And so it's easy for us to get guests on the show, and also for people to let us know what's going on. I think we'll probably quit for sure when Joel and I have no idea what's going on. When nobody we know is there and nobody's telling us anything. That'll be time for us to definitely call it quits.
David, I'll tell you how you can make your show really, really popular, though. I'm going to give you unsolicited advice.
Okay.
Sign up to be a sponsor of Bourbon in the Backroom.
I think the realtors are already pretty supportive, Joel.
This is true. Our realtors are great. We have a great time with them.
Yeah, well, that's actually where I ran across you guys, was at the state leadership conference back earlier this year. When you guys came in and did your live show from there. Just great experience.
Thank you.
And someone who was trying to do the same thing, it was, it made a lot of sense to start pursuing you guys, to have you on our show to talk about it and what your goals for it, because, George and I want to educate people as well about real estate, but also about, living here in the Midlands in the state of South Carolina. So we're about the end of our time. I'll ask you guys one more question, since we kind of have a dichotomy and undergraduate loyalties here. Palmetto Bowl 2023, both our teams, are kind of seem to be in the same place, win-loss. What are your predictions for, the Saturday after Thanksgiving? Who walks away with the trophy?
Well, this is a character flaw that I have, and I'm not proud of it. And I used to hide this when I was in politics because I didn't want to offend anybody, but now I don't really care. I get as much or more satisfaction when Dabo Swinney loses than when Carolina wins. I can't help it. I'm sorry.
In other words,
I'm not one of those that's going to look you in the eye and say, "Oh, I root for the state." Yeah, I don't know. I think listen. Of course, I'm going to say Carolina. We were it was an incredible last year. Ask us the week before the game, because I think both teams are still trying to figure out who they are right now. But I'm gonna go with my Gamecocks. It's at home. It's Spencer Rattler's last home game, and it should be a huge crowd at Williams-Brice Stadium. So I'm gonna go with the Gamecocks. Tigers just can't seem quite to find their stride this year, and that just really. I just breaks my heart to see that.
David, I've got I'm a Clemson grad, and I'm also a USC grad. My USC degree has allowed me to earn my living, be successful. So I unlike Joel, I pull for USC all the time. But I met my wife at Clemson, and as much as I love to earn a living and be successful, I love my wife even more. So I'm going to say that in this year, when the Tigers are struggling, they're going to need to win the Palmetto Bowl more than ever, and they'll probably lift it off.
What do you think, David? What's your prediction?
So I come from a house divided. My dad went to Clemson, and then he turned around and sent me to University of South Carolina.
That's South Carolina, right? That's how that's how our world works.
So that's how the world rolls. And I love my dad, wish he were still with us. I loved it when he would come down and go to the games with me. But sorry, Dad, I'm with you, Joel. I want to see Dabo Swinney just stomping up and down that sideline like a spoiled little kid whining.
And I didn't always feel that way. But I will give him a lot of credit. And I think they're trying to figure out, college athletics is a little crazy today. You've got this name, image, and likeness, NIL. You've got the transfer portal. And it's just such a different world. I'm very close to our basketball program here, both in Coach Lamont Parrish, who I think is going to do a great job. I was friendly with Frank Martin. It's just such a different world out there. And I say that about Dabo and Clemson. I give them all the credit in the world. I always used to say about Clemson football, I am both depressed and impressed, because they took a mediocre program and rose to the national top. And I think the big question that everybody's asking now is, can they get it back there? And only time will tell.
Only time will tell. Well, gentlemen, this has been just a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much. Before we go, will one of you want to tell our listeners where they can find your podcast if they don't already listen or subscribe to you guys?
Sure. You can go to any place that you get a podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google us up online, go to our Facebook, Bourbon in the Backroom, and you can download the podcast. We've got a great one coming up this week. Vincent mentioned our remote podcast. We try to get, and if you've listened to our podcast, you've only heard this about 100 times, but Vincent teaches at the Honors College. In fact, my first time at the Honors College was going to one of our podcasts.
They barely let him on campus.
Right, they still have my picture on them. But we're going to interview Mayor Rickman this week, Mayor Daniel Rickman, and we had him on this podcast 2 years ago when he was running for mayor, when he and Councilwoman Tamika Isaac Devine were in a runoff. But anywhere you get your podcast, you can just Google up Bourbon in the Backroom or do it in your search bar.
This episode of The Cool Guys is sponsored by Bell Carrington, Price & Gregg. Bell Carrington is our choice for the best real estate attorneys in town. They are highly communicative and make sure that the closing process is as smooth as possible. With offices in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, They can handle any of your real estate finance, eminent domain, financial services litigation, and litigation needs. Call their Columbia SC office today at 803-509-5078.